March 3rd, 1943. The sun beat down with a vengeance on the port of Tunis, a relentless, punishing glare reflecting off the shimmering Mediterranean. This wasn't a postcard moment. This was the crucible of war, and here, on this sweltering dock, exhaustion wasn't just a state of being, it was a tactical weapon. German supply officers, their uniforms stained with sweat, barked orders at weary platoons. These men, soldiers whose courage on the battlefield was unquestioned, were now reduced to beasts of burden, struggling to wrestle heavy wooden ammunition crates from the holds of transport ships. Each crate, a monstrous 200 pounds of lethal cargo, demanded the collective grunt and strain of 4 men, ropes biting into their hands, improvising ramps from planks, inching each box onto the unforgiving quay. This was the logistical heart of the Wehrmacht, a vast, intricate machinery of war powered not by sophisticated engineering, but by sheer human will, discipline, and the raw, unyielding strength of its soldiers. It was a method that had seen them conquer vast swaths of Europe, from the swift devastation of Poland to the rolling plains of France, and deep into the endless expanse of Russia. Their doctrine, refined through triumph after triumph, was simple. Men were expendable, machines were secondary, and true military prowess lay in the fortitude of the individual soldier. But something was stirring in the shadows, something alien to this deeply ingrained philosophy. 4 months prior, American forces had landed hundreds of miles to the west, in Morocco and Algeria, igniting Operation Torch. Reports, initially dismissed as curiosities, began to filter through German intelligence channels. They spoke of American supply depots, not unlike the one they were struggling with in Tunis, but with a crucial, almost unbelievable difference. The Americans, these reports claimed, were using peculiar mechanical lifting devices. Machines. Devices that, inexplicably, eliminated much of the manual labor that Germans considered absolutely essential to military discipline, to the very character of a soldier. Imagine the scoffs, the outright laughter in the German officers' messes. Americans, with their machines, what kind of soldier needs a machine to lift what his own hands can carry? This was the prevailing sentiment, a dismissive sneer at what they perceived as a symptom of American physical and moral weakness. They saw pampered indulgence, a lack of soldierly grit. They believed their own rigorous training, their iron discipline, their capacity for suffering would always triumph over such perceived softness. They couldn't have been more catastrophically wrong. This seemingly minor disdain for American materials handling technology would prove to be one of the Wehrmacht's most profoundly costly miscalculations, a blind spot that would ultimately contribute to the unraveling of their entire campaign in North Africa. What German officers interpreted as an almost effeminate softness, a lack of soldierly rigor, was in fact a revolutionary, almost alien approach to logistics. It was a philosophy born not of military tradition, but of an entirely different, uniquely American cultural crucible, industrial capitalism. This revolutionary approach would not just help bury the Africa Corps under an avalanche of efficiently delivered supplies. It would also fundamentally reshape the very nature of modern warfare, and eventually, global commerce itself. At the heart of this revolution was a humble, unassuming piece of machinery, the forklift. A simple machine, mocked by German quartermasters as an unnecessary luxury, a testament to American decadence. But this luxury represented a fundamental divergence in understanding modern industrial warfare, a divergence that would prove absolutely decisive. To grasp the magnitude of this disconnect, we need to understand the German military of 1943. While they had pioneered the revolutionary blitzkrieg tactics, emphasizing speed, surprise, and mechanization in their combat operations, their logistical backbone remained astonishingly, almost anachronistically, primitive. It was a military that, in many ways, still operated on principles that would have been instantly recognizable to armies of the previous century. The paradox was glaring. The same military that developed advanced tanks like the Tiger, sophisticated air support tactics, and revolutionary operational concepts like deep penetration maneuvers, still moved the vast majority of its supplies using methods Napoleon himself would have understood perfectly. Consider the standard German infantry division's supply train. It was a logistical beast, an operational paradox. It boasted 256 trucks, certainly a nod to modernity, but these were merely a veneer over a deeper, more ancient reality. These trucks were supplemented by an astounding 2,652 horses. Yes, horses. In 1943, and to manage this enormous, slow-moving logistical apparatus, it required over 4,000 men, 4,000 human beings, simply to move supplies from railheads to the very front lines. This wasn't just a quaint historical detail. This massive manpower investment in logistics had profound and devastating implications. It meant fewer soldiers available for actual combat operations. Every German soldier pulling a cart or unloading a box was a soldier not holding a rifle on the front, not crewing a tank, not operating a radio. It was a constant drain on their most precious resource, fighting men. We often imagine war as a clash of titans, of advanced weaponry and brilliant tactics. But the harsh, often overlooked truth is that wars are fundamentally won or lost in the supply lines, in the gritty, often unglamorous world of logistics. For the Germans, this meant soldiers forming endless human chains to load ammunition. It meant rolling heavy barrels up precarious wooden planks. It meant carrying back-breaking loads on their backs, across distances that their American counterparts were covering with sleek, efficient, mechanized transport. This wasn't merely a matter of resource scarcity, though that certainly played its part. No, this reflected a far more fundamental philosophical difference, a deep-seated cultural divergence about the very nature of military efficiency, and indeed, the nature of human strength itself. Across the Atlantic, American industrial philosophy had taken a completely different, almost diametrically opposed path. While German military culture was steeped in the Prussian valorization of hardship, the American ethos was forged in the crucible of ceaseless innovation and relentless efficiency. We see its roots in companies like the Clark Equipment Company in Buchanan, Michigan. Back in 1917, long before the thunder of global war echoed across the oceans, Clark had been developing powered material handling equipment. Their initial creation wasn't designed for the battlefield, but for their own factory floor. The truck tractor, a humble device for moving materials within their sprawling manufacturing complex. This wasn't driven by military needs. It was driven by the insatiable demands of burgeoning American consumer capitalism, a system that required the ever more efficient movement of goods through factories, warehouses, and distribution centers to meet the demands of a rapidly growing population with an appetite for products. By 1924, Clark engineers had refined their designs, adding vertical masts and, crucially, forks. The modern forklift, a machine we now see in nearly every warehouse and shipping yard globally, was born. The evolution continued at a rapid pace through the 1930s. In 1938, Clark introduced the car loader, which was, in essence, the world's first modern short-coupled internal combustion forklift truck. This compact, incredibly maneuverable design wasn't just capable of lifting heavy loads. It could stack them vertically, maximizing storage space and operate with surprising agility even in confined spaces, a crucial feature for the increasingly complex industrial environments of the era. By 1942, as America was finally mobilizing for war on an unprecedented scale, Clark had even developed battery-powered forklifts. These marvels of engineering could operate an entire shift on a single charge, eliminating the need for constant refueling during critical operations, a seemingly minor detail that would have monumental consequences on a global scale. This was civilian technology, born of civilian needs, refined by civilian ingenuity. Yet, when America finally plunged into the maelstrom of World War II, this robust, efficient, and readily available civilian technology was immediately and seamlessly adapted for military use. Clark rapidly became a major, indispensable supplier of forklift trucks and tow tractors to United States forces. Military procurement records from 1943 paint a stark picture. American forces were deploying these forklifts at major supply depots, ports, and airfields across North Africa. For American planners, these machines weren't seen as luxurious conveniences or signs of weakness. They were understood, intrinsically, as essential force multipliers. They weren't just tools, they were mathematical equations made manifest, fundamentally changing the entire calculus of military logistics. The impact, for anyone willing to see it, was immediate and starkly apparent in North Africa. At American supply depots in vital ports like Oran and Casablanca, the contrast was almost unbelievable. A single soldier, comfortably seated, operating a forklift, could unload an entire truck in a mere 15 minutes. This same task, in a German supply line, required a dozen men working for over an hour, straining and sweating under the blistering sun. And it wasn't just about speed. It was about sustainability, about the human element. The forklift operator remained fresh, alert, and capable after hours of work. The German manual labor teams, by contrast, were often utterly exhausted after moving just a few tons of supplies. This wasn't a sprint, it was a marathon, and the American system was designed for endurance. American supply operations could run 24 hours a day, with operators working in shifts, a continuous, unrelenting flow of materiel. German operations relying on human muscle slowed dramatically, often grinding to a halt, as soldiers simply succumbed to fatigue. The true scale of this logistical disparity wasn't lost on the Germans for long. The Battle of Kasserine Pass in February 1943, though a German tactical victory in the field, provided German officers with their first close, unvarnished look at the inner workings of American logistics methods. What they discovered stunned the seasoned Wehrmacht quartermasters. Captured American supply dumps revealed an abundance of materiel that beggared belief. It wasn't just the sheer quantity of supplies, impressive as that was. It was the systematic organization, the meticulous efficiency made possible by mechanical handling equipment. Imagine the scene. German logistics officers, accustomed to chaotic piles and scattered depots, now peering through field glasses at enemy supply areas. They saw supplies neatly stacked on standardized wooden pallets, arranged in precise, almost clinical rows, with clear, unobstructed lanes designed specifically for forklift access. Everything was labeled, inventoried with a precision that manual handling could never hope to achieve. They watched, fascinated and increasingly disquieted, as small, agile vehicles with protruding forks darted between these towering stacks. These machines lifted and moved loads that, just moments before, would have required entire squads of German soldiers to handle, grunting and straining. The American operators, meanwhile, sat comfortably, protected from the relentless sun by overhead guards, moving tons of material with an almost casual, effortless grace. To German eyes, conditioned by decades of military tradition, that saw logistics as a crucible of soldierly fortitude, a test of character and physical endurance. This scene seemed almost decadent. It challenged their deepest assumptions about strength, about labor, about war itself. The numbers themselves revealed the true, overwhelming scope of American production and logistical superiority. During the war, American industry was a colossus, churning out an astonishing 297,000 aircraft, 193,000 artillery pieces, 86,000 tanks, and over 2 million military trucks. These are statistics that almost defy comprehension. But production, as critical as it was only half of the equation. Having the materiel was one thing. The ability to move these supplies efficiently from American factories, across vast oceans, and onto the North African battlefields was another entirely. This required nothing less than a logistics revolution, and the forklift, in its humble efficiency, perfectly exemplified that revolution. Consider the journey of a single pallet of ammunition from an American factory in, say, Ohio, all the way to the front lines in Tunisia. At the factory, forklifts would meticulously load the palletized ammunition onto waiting trains. At East Coast ports, bustling hubs like New York and Norfolk, forklifts seamlessly transferred these same pallets from the trains directly into the cavernous holds of Liberty ships, those utilitarian workhorses of the Allied war effort. Upon arrival in North African ports, the process simply reversed. Forklifts swiftly unloaded the ships, depositing the supplies directly onto waiting military trucks. At inland supply depots, forklifts organized and stacked these palletized goods with methodical precision, ensuring easy access and rapid distribution. While forklifts were understandably less common at the very forward supply points near the combat zones due to terrain and security, their profound impact on rear area efficiency was undeniable. They freed up an immense amount of manpower, allowing those soldiers to be deployed to the actual front lines where they were desperately needed. German logistics, by stark contrast, was a story of unrelenting, back-breaking manual labor at every single stage. German soldiers hand-loaded individual shells and boxes onto trains, one by one. At ports, endless human chains passed supplies from hand to hand, a primitive energy-sapping relay race against time. Ships were unloaded box by box, barrel by barrel, often taking days for tasks that American crews completed in hours. German supply dumps were frequently chaotic accumulations, rather than organized, efficient warehouses. The mathematics of this approach were inexorable, brutal in their simplicity. Moving the same tonnage of supplies required vastly more German soldiers, consumed significantly more time, and critically, those soldiers arrived at the front lines already utterly exhausted, their combat effectiveness diminished by their arduous logistics duties. The extreme temperatures of North Africa amplified this disparity to a brutal, almost unbearable degree. In the crushing, oppressive heat that often soared above 120 degrees Fahrenheit, German soldiers performing heavy manual labor quickly became heat casualties. Dehydration, debilitating heat exhaustion, and even deadly heat stroke decimated German logistics units. It wasn't just a matter of discomfort. It was a profound, crippling loss of operational capacity. American forklift operators, by contrast, performed their duties from seated positions, often under the relative shade of their overhead guards, preserving their energy, their health, and their combat readiness. A single heat casualty among German supply troops could mean a 20% reduction in a team's handling capacity, an immediate, measurable loss. A heat casualty among American operators, while unfortunate, could be quickly and efficiently replaced by another trained operator with minimal disruption to the continuous flow of supplies. The response from the German High Command to these mounting reports of American mechanical handling equipment revealed a fundamental, almost ideological misunderstanding of modern warfare. Orders from Berlin, far from addressing the technological gap, doubled down on traditional German virtues: better organization, stricter discipline, longer working hours. German officers were exhorted to inspire their men to greater efforts through fervent patriotic exhortations and appeals to an almost mythical warrior spirit. What they desperately needed were machines. What they got were speeches. It was a failure of imagination, a failure to adapt, rooted deep within their military culture. There were, of course, some German logistics officers, individuals who had worked in German industry before the war, who understood the profound multiplication of effort that mechanical handling equipment could provide. They wrote detailed, often impassioned reports, urging the adoption of similar equipment. But these reports, born of practical experience and clear-eyed observation, faced an almost impenetrable wall of skepticism from their superiors. These high-ranking officers, steeped in tradition, often viewed mechanical assistance not as a strategic advantage, but as evidence of a declining warrior spirit, a softening of the very qualities they believed made the German soldier supreme. The Wehrmacht's traditional, almost romantic emphasis on physical hardship as character building clashed violently with the cold, hard, practical reality of modern logistics requirements. This attitude reflected a deeper current within German military culture, an inheritance from the venerated Prussian military tradition. It was a valorization of hardship as a crucible for character, a belief that suffering forged stronger, more resilient soldiers. Mechanical assistance, in this worldview, was seen as potentially corrupting, diluting the very essence of soldierly virtue. American military culture, on the other hand, influenced profoundly by industrial efficiency experts, business practices, and the relentless pursuit of productivity, took the exact opposite view. Their question was simple, pragmatic, and utterly devoid of romanticism. Why waste precious human energy on tasks machines can perform better, faster, and more reliably? The logic was unassailable. Save the soldier's strength for tasks only humans could perform: thinking, fighting, leading, innovating. This wasn't about being soft. It was about being smart. The Africa Corps faced yet another daunting logistical challenge that mechanical handling could have significantly alleviated: the chronic lack of port capacity. Tobruk, the main Axis port in North Africa, could handle only about 20,000 tons of supplies monthly. This was a tragically insufficient trickle compared to the 100,000 tons the Africa Corps desperately needed to sustain its operations. This bottleneck wasn't solely due to limited dock space. It was largely, critically, due to the agonizingly slow pace of manual unloading. Ships, laden with vital supplies, often sat in harbor for days, sometimes weeks, being unloaded by hand, box by laborious box, barrel by straining barrel. Mechanical equipment, as the Americans were demonstrating just a few hundred miles away, could have cleared those same ships in mere hours. American operations at North African ports provided a stark, undeniable demonstration of what was possible with mechanical handling. At Casablanca, for instance, American engineers swiftly established supply operations that moved an astonishing 50,000 tons monthly through facilities where French colonial authorities, relying primarily on manual labor, had previously managed a paltry 10,000 tons. The difference wasn't just the presence of forklifts. It was an entire, integrated system designed from the ground up around mechanical handling. This included pallet standardization, meticulously planned warehouse layouts, and precisely scheduled transport. Every aspect optimized for maximum mechanical efficiency. It was a masterclass in industrial-scale logistics, brought to the battlefield. The psychological impact on German troops was profound and insidious. Letters home from German soldiers, though heavily censored, began to reveal a growing, unsettling awareness of American material superiority. Soldiers wrote with a mixture of amazement and despair about watching American supply operations, sometimes from a distance, sometimes after capture. The sheer, overwhelming efficiency of American logistics, symbolized by that humble, indefatigable forklift, represented a kind of warfare the Wehrmacht simply hadn't anticipated, hadn't prepared for, and fundamentally didn't understand. It was a war of systems, not just of individual heroism. By the spring of 1943, even the legendary Field Marshal Erwin Rommel himself, the Desert Fox, renowned for his tactical brilliance and daring maneuvers, recognized the depth of the logistics crisis. He found himself increasingly constrained, not primarily by Allied combat power, but by the simple, brutal inability to move supplies efficiently from ports to his beleaguered forces. His urgent requests to Berlin for mechanical handling equipment, for the very machines he had initially dismissed as irrelevant, faced a harsh, unforgiving reality. Germany lacked both the industrial capacity to produce such equipment in sufficient quantity and, crucially, the fuel to operate it. This pervasive fuel shortage highlighted yet another critical, often overlooked advantage of American electric forklifts. While German vehicles, tanks, trucks, and even motorcycles competed for precious, increasingly scarce gasoline, American electric forklifts operated on battery power. These batteries were charged by generators located in secure rear areas where fuel for electricity generation was comparatively more plentiful, or often where they could tap into existing power grids. A German truck moving supplies consumed fuel that could have powered a tank, a fighter plane, or a desperately needed reconnaissance mission. An American electric forklift, by contrast, consumed electricity, which, in those rear areas, had no comparable alternative military use. It was a subtle but profound conservation of critical resources. It's important to clarify that the Wehrmacht wasn't entirely devoid of mechanical handling equipment. They did possess some, primarily larger cranes and hoists, mostly in rear areas within Germany and occupied territories. But this equipment was neither standardized nor available in significant quantities for forward deployment. German industry, known for its engineering prowess, had certainly produced various types of lifting equipment. However, these were typically large, specialized machines, designed for static factory or dock use, not the versatile, mobile forklifts that the Americans were deploying with such devastating effect. Moreover, German military doctrine viewed such equipment as belonging to fixed installations, industrial sites, not as integral components of mobile military operations in the field. This was a critical distinction, a philosophical line drawn in the sand that proved to be strategically ruinous. The Battle of Medellin in March 1943, Rommel's last major offensive in Africa, vividly demonstrated the cumulative, destructive effect of these logistics disparities. Rommel's attack failed, not just due to Allied defensive strength, but partly due to critical ammunition shortages caused by inefficient supply handling. German artillery batteries ran desperately short of shells, their barrages dwindling, while American and British forces, supplied by their mechanically efficient logistics systems, maintained sustained, relentless bombardments. The cold, hard mathematics of modern warfare had turned decisively against any force relying primarily on manual labor. Human endurance, however valorous, simply could not compete with mechanized efficiency on an industrial scale. As the Africa Corps retreated westward, through Libya and into Tunisia, a trail of logistical failures marked their path. They left behind supply dumps that told a grim, silent story. Scattered, disorganized piles of equipment, much of it damaged in handling, starkly contrasted with the neat, meticulously palletized American supplies advancing relentlessly behind them. German soldiers, desperately attempting to evacuate vital supplies, found that what had taken days to unload by hand could not be quickly reloaded for withdrawal. Their own methods had trapped them, a self-inflicted wound. The final surrender in Tunisia in May 1943 brought over 230,000 Axis soldiers into Allied captivity. Among them were thousands of logistics personnel, the very men who had struggled with manual labor on the docks of Tunis and along the dusty roads of the desert. Their journey to prison camps in the United States would prove educational in ways the Wehrmacht High Command never intended, a harsh, undeniable lesson delivered by the very system they had scorned. German prisoners, transported to America, traveled in a relative comfort that must have been jarringly juxtaposed against their battlefield expectations. Ships that might have carried cargo, now efficiently loaded with prisoners, using organized embarkation procedures that themselves spoke volumes about efficiency. Upon arrival in American ports like Norfolk, Virginia, and New York, these former soldiers witnessed forklift operations on a scale that dwarfed anything they had seen or even imagined in Africa. These American ports handled more tonnage in a single day than German ports had managed in an entire week. The visual evidence was overwhelming, incontrovertible. At Camp Shelby, Mississippi, and other prisoner-of-war camps across the United States, German prisoners assigned to work details continued to observe American logistics operations firsthand. They watched, often in stunned silence, as forklifts unloaded entire train cars of supplies in hours, tasks that would have taken days, even weeks, using the manual German methods they were accustomed to. Former logistics officers among the prisoners, men trained in military calculus, began making their own calculations, chilling estimates that soon spread through the camps. A single American depot, they realized, handled more supplies daily than entire German divisions had managed to move in a week of intense operations. The scale was simply beyond their previous comprehension. But the prisoners observed something else, something even more profoundly challenging, something that struck at the very heart of the Nazi ideology they had been indoctrinated with. Many of the forklift operators they saw were African Americans, members of segregated quartermaster units. Despite facing discrimination within American society, these soldiers operated complex machinery with a skill and efficiency that German racial theory, with its rigid hierarchies and claims of supposedly inferior races, said was impossible. The mechanical advantage provided by the forklift rendered the operator's race completely irrelevant. What mattered was skill in operating the machine, not physical brute strength or supposed racial characteristics. It was a silent, powerful refutation of deeply held, destructive beliefs. Some German prisoners were even employed in American warehouses and farms, where they learned to operate agricultural equipment and, crucially, materials handling equipment. The transformation from skepticism to profound appreciation was often rapid and complete. Prisoners who had dismissed mechanical handling as an American weakness now discovered that such equipment allowed them to accomplish significantly more work, with far less physical exertion, preserving their energy and their health. Their first-hand observations, their practical experiences, would later significantly influence German industrial practices as these men returned home after the war, carrying not just memories, but vital lessons. The contrast with German logistics became even starker as prisoners learned about American production methods. They discovered that American factories were producing materials handling equipment in staggering quantities, each machine representing the cargo handling capacity of multiple workers. And this same seemingly inexhaustible industrial base was simultaneously churning out trucks, tanks, aircraft, and ships in quantities that seemed impossible to minds shaped by German scarcity, by the constant limitations and shortages that had plagued their war effort. The sheer scale was a revelation, a glimpse into a world of abundance and efficiency they had never known. The German military's profound failure to appreciate mechanical handling equipment reflected broader, deeply entrenched weaknesses within German military culture. It was an emphasis on will over material, on spirit over technology, on tradition over innovation. This mindset created critical blind spots, intellectual and operational, that proved catastrophically costly. While German engineers undoubtedly created impressive, even terrifying weapons like the V-2 rocket and advanced jet aircraft, they tragically neglected the mundane but absolutely essential technologies that actually sustained military operations. This neglect stemmed from fundamental misunderstandings about the nature of modern warfare itself. German military theorists, brilliant in their own right, largely focused on operational art, the grand movement and engagement of large formations, the ballet of combat. American military planners, meanwhile, were increasingly focused on logistics, the often unseen science of moving supplies to support those formations. The Germans perfected blitzkrieg, a breathtaking tactical innovation, but they couldn't sustainably supply it. The Americans may have been, at times, less elegant tactically, but they could sustain operations indefinitely through their overwhelming, methodical, and profoundly superior logistics. The forklift, that simple, unglamorous machine, represented something far larger than just mechanical handling. It embodied an entire philosophy of warfare, a paradigm shift that valued efficiency over tradition, pragmatism over ideology, and ultimately, concrete results over heroic appearances. Every American forklift operating in the sweltering deserts of North Africa was, in its own silent way, a statement. Modern war was won not by warrior spirit alone, however valiant, but by industrial capacity, intelligently and efficiently applied. After Germany's unconditional surrender in May 1945, the full, devastating extent of the logistics disparity became painfully clear. Allied investigators, meticulously poring over captured German military records, made a shocking discovery. The Wehrmacht had never fully mechanized its logistics. They had depended on horses and manual labor throughout the entire war, right up to the bitter end. Even elite units like the Afrika Korps, lionized in propaganda as fully mechanized, had relied heavily on manual handling for their critical supply operations. The truth was far more complex and far less glorious than the myth. The occupation of Germany provided an immediate, real-world demonstration of American logistics methods, a stark contrast to the destruction wrought by the war. American forces used their mechanical handling equipment not for war, but for peace. To clear mountains of rubble from bombed cities, to efficiently distribute desperately needed food to starving civilians, and to begin the monumental task of rebuilding shattered infrastructure. German civilians who had been told for years about American weakness watched in awe as American equipment accomplished in hours what German work crews, relying on manual methods, needed days to complete. The evidence was irrefutable, undeniable. The Marshall Plan, initiated in 1948, became a powerful accelerator for Germany's adoption of American logistics methods. American advisors didn't just provide much-needed money. They also provided invaluable knowledge, including intensive training in industrial efficiency and mechanical handling. German factories, which had once produced instruments of war, now began producing industrial equipment, often incorporating American design principles. The transformation, from initial resistance and skepticism to widespread enthusiasm, was remarkably swift. By 1950, West German companies were manufacturing their own state-of-the-art materials handling equipment. Crucially, many former Wehrmacht officers, men who had experienced the painful lessons of North Africa firsthand, were often involved in this conversion, bringing their hard-won knowledge and determination to civilian industry. These men had learned through bitter experience that mechanical handling wasn't a sign of weakness. It was the very essence of efficiency and, ultimately, national strength. They brought to German industry an almost evangelistic enthusiasm for American logistics methods, determined that Germany would never again fall behind in this absolutely crucial area. The Korean War, unexpectedly, provided a further boost to German industrial recovery. American forces, needing additional equipment on a global scale, contracted with German manufacturers. The former enemy was now producing essential equipment for its former conqueror. German-made industrial goods, incorporating improvements and refinements on the American designs they had so diligently studied, began appearing in international markets. By 1955, the transformation was complete, profound, and utterly inspiring. West Germany had not only rebuilt, it had become one of Europe's leading industrial producers. German industrial equipment was exported globally, competing fiercely and successfully with American models in international markets. The student had not merely learned from the teacher. The student was now innovating, improving upon the original lessons, becoming a master in their own right. The founding of the Bundeswehr, West Germany's new military force in 1955, further solidified these hard-learned lessons about logistics. Mechanical handling equipment was no longer considered a luxury or an afterthought. It was considered as absolutely essential as weapons themselves. Every Bundeswehr logistics unit was meticulously equipped with modern, efficient mechanical handling equipment. German soldiers, a new generation, were trained to operate mechanical handling equipment as a basic, fundamental military skill. The contrast with the old Wehrmacht doctrine, with its emphasis on manual labor and stoicism, could not have been more complete, more profound. It was a deliberate, institutionalized paradigm shift. Industrial statistics told a compelling story of this remarkable transformation. Before the war, German warehouses and factories had possessed minimal mechanical handling equipment, often relying on rudimentary methods. By 1960, West Germany boasted extensive, highly integrated mechanical handling systems in operation across its industrial landscape. German industrial productivity, meticulously rebuilt on these principles of mechanical efficiency, was achieving staggering growth rates that deeply impressed economic observers worldwide. The philosophical transformation was perhaps even more profound than the physical one. German industrial culture, once steeped in a proud tradition of hard work and manual skill, now wholeheartedly embraced mechanical assistance as the undeniable path to prosperity. The work ethic that had once valorized sheer physical effort now, with a new wisdom, valorized efficiency. Working smart replaced working hard as the highest virtue. Veterans of the Africa Corps, many of whom were now working in German industry, became vocal, passionate advocates for mechanical handling. They spoke at industrial conferences, wrote articles in influential trade journals, and painstakingly taught younger workers about the critical importance of logistics efficiency. Their message was consistent, clear, and delivered with the weight of experience. Germany had lost the war not primarily on the battlefields, where their soldiers had often fought with extraordinary valor, but in the sprawling, often chaotic supply depots, where American mechanical efficiency had simply overwhelmed German manual methods. By 1965, German engineering, building on its traditional excellence in mechanical design, was beginning to truly excel in materials handling technology. German engineers developed groundbreaking innovations in hydraulic systems, vastly improved safety features, and sophisticated ergonomic designs. The German industrial sector was no longer merely copying American models. It was creating original, cutting-edge designs that set new global standards. The economic miracle of West Germany in the 1950s and 60s, that astounding period of rapid growth and prosperity, was built partly on this foundation of logistics efficiency, learned directly from American examples, but then rapidly internalized and perfected. German factories, equipped with these advanced mechanical handling systems, achieved productivity levels that continued to impress international observers. Every piece of German materials handling equipment operating in these factories was a tangible reminder of profound lessons learned through the crucible of defeat. The contrast with East Germany, under Soviet influence, was incredibly instructive. East German industry, bound by a different ideology, continued to rely heavily on manual labor, often viewing mechanical handling as an extravagant capitalist luxury. The productivity gap between East and West Germany widened demonstrably year after year, with mechanical handling efficiency being one of the most critical differentiators. When reunification finally came in 1990, East German workers were often amazed, almost stunned, by the ubiquitous mechanical handling equipment that was standard in every West German facility. It was a tangible illustration of decades of diverging development. Military historians studying World War II logistics have consistently concluded that mechanical handling equipment, though often unglamorous and certainly lacking the heroic appeal of tanks and aircraft, was, in fact, one of the most important, truly transformative technologies affecting logistics efficiency. The ability to move supplies efficiently and relentlessly from factories to the very front lines fundamentally influenced which armies could sustain their operations and which inevitably struggled and ultimately failed due to logistical collapse. The Wehrmacht, for all its tactical brilliance and the bravery of its soldiers, never fully solved this fundamental equation. The forklift's impact, however, extended far beyond mere military applications. It quietly, profoundly, reshaped global commerce itself. The standardized wooden pallet, specifically designed for efficient forklift handling, became the basic, universal unit of international trade. Shipping containers, meticulously sized for efficient mechanical handling by colossal cranes and forklifts, revolutionized maritime commerce, shrinking distances and accelerating global trade. The global economy that emerged, robust and interconnected, after World War II was built, quite literally, on the foundations of efficient materials handling. Today, modern military forces universally recognize mechanical handling as absolutely essential to their operations. No major military force today would ever consider relying primarily on manual labor for logistics operations. The hard-won lesson, demonstrated so starkly by American mechanical efficiency in the North African deserts, has been thoroughly absorbed, institutionalized, and integrated into every aspect of military planning. Mechanical advantage in logistics is understood to be as critically important as firepower in combat. The German experience represents one of history's most complete and astonishing transformations in industrial and military philosophy. A military culture that had, for decades, dismissed mechanical handling as a sign of weakness, as an almost decadent luxury, ultimately embraced it as absolutely essential to both military prowess and economic power. This profound transformation required not just adopting new technology, it demanded changing fundamental beliefs about strength, about work, and about the very definition of efficiency. Today's German logistics industry is not merely competent. It is highly advanced, a global leader in innovation and efficiency. German companies produce some of the most sophisticated mechanical handling equipment in the world. German logistics expertise is exported globally through consulting services and equipment sales. The nation that once dismissed mechanical materials handling has become a global leader in the technology it once scorned. The symbolism of this transformation resonates across decades. The forklift, that simple utilitarian machine with two metal prongs, challenged not just German armies, it challenged deeply held German assumptions about the nature of strength and efficiency. It demonstrated unequivocally that true power comes not from human muscle alone, however formidable, but from human intelligence, applied judiciously and pragmatically to mechanical advantage. The Wehrmacht learned this lesson far too late to avoid catastrophic defeat, but they learned it thoroughly enough to ensure it would never be forgotten by their successors. In military museums across Germany today, preserved examples of American equipment from World War II are often displayed alongside the iconic tanks and aircraft. Among them, unglamorous and utilitarian, are often a few forklifts, or at least images of them in action. These machines tell a story as vital and important as any combat vehicle. They remind visitors that wars are won not just by courage and brilliant tactics, but by the relentless, often unglamorous efficiency of moving supplies from one place to another. The final lesson, then, is both simple and profoundly relevant. Nations, militaries, and even businesses that dismiss technological innovation as a weakness, as an unnecessary complication, or as a challenge to cherished traditions, do so at their extreme peril. The German officers who dismissed American mechanical handling in 1942 simply could not imagine that these seemingly mundane machines would contribute significantly to their ultimate defeat. They saw mechanical assistance as decadence, as a softening, when it was, in fact, an inevitable evolution. They valorized traditional, brute strength, while their enemies were multiplying their strength exponentially through judicious application of technology. The transformation was substantial by the 1970s, when German manufacturers were not just using, but selling their own highly advanced materials handling equipment internationally, even back to the United States. The circle had closed. The student had not only become accomplished, but in many ways, a new master. Yet, the core lesson remained, enduring and undeniable. Never dismiss an innovation simply because it makes work easier. In modern warfare, in modern industry, and indeed, in modern life, making work easier means accomplishing more with less effort, less time, and less human cost. And those who accomplish more with less inevitably gain the decisive advantage. Standing in a modern German warehouse today, watching sophisticated automated equipment move goods with computerized precision. It's difficult, almost impossible to imagine that such machines were once dismissed as unnecessary, even contemptible, by a professional military renowned for its rigor and discipline. Yet that dismissal, rooted deeply in cultural assumptions, traditional thinking, and a profound misreading of the industrial age, contributed directly to Germany's catastrophic logistics challenges in World War II. The Wehrmacht that dismissed mechanical handling was ultimately defeated, in part, by the very efficiency it so fundamentally failed to comprehend and embrace. The victory of mechanical efficiency was incremental, quiet, and often overlooked, but it was utterly decisive. No grand monuments commemorate materials handling excellence. No medals were struck for logistics efficiency. Yet, mechanical handling fundamentally changed warfare by demonstrating, beyond any doubt, that in industrial conflict, the side that moves its supplies most efficiently gains an immense, often insurmountable advantage. This lesson, learned in the scorching North African deserts, where German soldiers exhausted themselves in grueling manual labor, while American equipment worked continuously, resonates powerfully in every modern military logistics operation across the globe. The story of German attitudes toward mechanical handling is, at its heart, a cautionary tale. It speaks to the profound dangers of dismissing innovation, particularly when that innovation challenges deeply ingrained cultural assumptions and cherished traditions. The Wehrmacht entered World War II supremely confident that German discipline and physical strength would overcome American mechanical methods. They discovered instead, through brutal experience, that mechanical assistance multiplied human capability in ways that no amount of discipline, no amount of individual fortitude could ever match. Mechanical handling didn't replace human strength. It amplified it. It leveraged it. It made it more effective. Understanding this critical distinction earlier might very well have altered the course of German logistics practices, and perhaps even the war itself. The legacy of this profound shift continues to shape our world in countless, often invisible ways. It lives on in our global supply chains. Every efficiently handled load in today's commerce, every container seamlessly moved in modern ports, every warehouse operating with automated, mechanical precision, all trace their fundamental development and underlying philosophy to the logistics evolution forged in the crucible of World War II. The mechanical handling that German officers so casually dismissed in North Africa became, paradoxically, the very foundation of global commerce. In that transformation, from military necessity to commercial ubiquity, lies the ultimate vindication of an efficient, pragmatic logistics philosophy. Today, as automation and artificial intelligence once again transform logistics, the core lesson remains as relevant and urgent as ever. Military forces, or indeed any large organization, that dismiss new technologies as unnecessary complications or as threats to traditional ways of working, risk severe inefficiency and strategic disadvantage. The side that moves supplies most efficiently, whether those supplies are moved by traditional methods or cutting-edge new technologies, will always maintain a decisive advantage. The German journey, from proudly dismissing to wholeheartedly embracing mechanical handling, teaches us that military superiority requires more than just advanced weapons and brave soldiers. It requires embracing innovations that multiply human capability, even, and perhaps especially, when those innovations challenge our most fundamental, cherished traditional concepts. The Wehrmacht failed to learn this lesson in time to avoid defeat, but their successors learned it so thoroughly, so completely, that Germany became a global leader in the very technology they had once dismissed with such disdain. In the end, mechanical efficiency proved decisive in logistics, not through direct combat, but through the relentless, undeniable mathematics of supply efficiency. While German soldiers exhausted themselves moving supplies manually, American mechanical methods moved vast, unimaginable quantities of material that sustained Allied armies across continents. Simple machines, born of industrial pragmatism, had contributed to changing warfare itself, teaching a profound lesson about modern conflict that remains valid today, perhaps more so than ever. In industrial war, and in the global economy it spawned, mechanical advantage in logistics provides crucial, often overlooked, benefits. The transformation was thorough, the lesson absorbed, the technology adopted, and ultimately refined and perfected by those who had initially rejected it. Germany's journey from dismissing mechanical handling as a weakness to becoming a global leader in materials handling technology represents one of history's most notable and inspiring reversals. In that reversal lies wisdom invaluable for any military force, any nation, and any enterprise. Dismissing innovation because it challenges traditional assumptions about strength, work, or efficiency can, and often does, prove catastrophically costly. The price of such dismissal, as discovered in the scorching deserts of North Africa, contributed significantly to logistics failure and ultimately to an unavoidable defeat. It's a lesson we would all do well to remember.